Ladies and gentlemen, let's start. The doors are open, so everyone can feel invited. I'm very glad we can meet at the panel of members of the Honorary Committee. We have not invited everyone today, even though we wanted to, but a discussion of over 20 persons would be difficult to moderate, and it would take much longer than a panel devoted to European universities. That's why in this group of eminent persons we're going to discuss the quality of education in a socially responsible university. I'm sharing this armchair with Mr. Rector here, so I'm sure we will find some space for Mr. Rector. Well, these are today's speakers. Dr. Dawid Kostecki, head of the National Agency for Academic Exchange, present. And Dr. Paweł Poszytek, CEO of the Foundation for Development of Education, Erasmus+, and so on and so forth. I suggest that add all this information when you have the first chance to take the floor. Mr. Waldemar Siwiński, President of the Perspektywy Educational Foundation, Professor Grzegorz Hajnderek, Rector of the Academy of Fine Arts in Katowice, Professor Grzegorz Juras, Rector of the Jerzy Kukuczka Academy of Physical Education in Katowice, Professor Ryszard Koziołek, Rector of the University of Silesia. I'm glad you are with us. I know you were supposed to be replaced by Rector Mężyk, but he had some other duties to attend to. Professor Tomasz Szczepański, Rector of the Silesian University of Medicine in Katowice. Professor Celina Olszak, Rector of the University of Economics in Katowice, Head of the Regional Conference of Academic Rectors, and Dr. Benedykt Odyja, Professor of the Kazimierz Wielki University in Bydgoszcz, Head of the All Polish University Education Commission. We have also Dr. Michael Matlosz, President of Euroscience. We are waving to him right now and sending our regards. We're going to hear from him during this panel. And let me, ladies and gentlemen, sit down right now and let's start from a provocative question. At our universities, should we change our missions? Should we change the perception of how we should be perceived outside if we want to be socially responsible universities? And our social responsibility is seen in what we do, how we cooperate with businesses and the society, but also it's visible in education. If we look at this education from the Polish qualification framework, we will see that social competences described there explicitly state that we want our students to be able to, literally, to be able to undertake socially responsible activities, to be active, to understand what's going on around them, and to act for public interest. It's quite a provocative question, but I hope it is worth our attention. It's no secret that at our universities we are changing right now the method of education and our curricula at the first cycle studies and long cycle studies, where we entered the effect of learning. Please let me find it right now. It states that our graduates will be ready to fulfill social responsibilities, co-organize activities for the benefit of the social environment, and will be open to resolutions of cognitive and practical problems based on science. So how do we want to verify the readiness for such a very engaged activities by students, and on the one hand, and on the other, how to be proud of such students. Well, we want to. It is very easy. Well, I'd like to ask several of you to make your statement, and then we'll have a discussion. So let's start, and the first person to speak, Rector Grzegorz Juras. That's why you're the first one sitting next to me. So, all right, so this is the order. Well, I understand this question as requiring a specific answer. You said provocation, so I'm going to answer no. So, as for the tools, methods, means, we naturally have to react adequately to the changing environment, and this is probably a without discussion. While about concerning the mission of a university, maybe let's stay where we are right now. It's physical education, not teaching of movement, and culture encompasses enough that we do not have to change anything. I know we have many speakers, so here I would like to stop, and I will take out my 1 more minute spared later on. Yes. Professor Benedict Odia now, from the point of view of his university, how do we perceive social responsibility in education? I think this question has been asked from the very morning, because in the morning we heard that the education and functioning of our universities should be concentrated on the students as entities, as subjects. Then we've heard that we've actually taken one step further, because I've heard one sentence from this professor's statement, a thinking person. So when getting ready for some lectures, our knowledge that we provide to our students, it's very fundamental to some degree, but also in some elements it's going to be obsolete 3 months later. Then I expanded my knowledge. I went to level -4 in this beautiful museum, and I learned what kind of new perspectives have to be developed to standardize our functioning. And at the end, that's why we were late, how to cooperate in the European and global sphere. This community is for me from both internal and external. So a university is an academic community. Students, teachers, researchers, administrative staff, which make up this single community. And our responsibility towards the society within which we function. So it is the local community that is very important as the addressee of the activity of the university. But we want to have a student exchange and exchange of scientific research. The second thing is education. And we have first cycle, second cycle, long cycle studies, also engineering studies. But also during the lecture, I was thinking about these micro certificates, because how happy we are at university when we have children's university, youth university, seniors university. All this is education. And this has direct effect on the society, plus promotion of knowledge. Universities, especially in the regions where universities have marked their position as leaders, in particular, are areas of culture. I'm thinking about arts, about music. Also physical education units at different universities. This all affects the cultural heritage. And the third mission of the university, i.e. cooperation and transfer of research into business. And what has been important recently, the university should improve the culture of public debate. And concerning parametrization and mentioning the experts from the Polish Accreditation Committee, i.e. both the internal debate of the academic environment and preparation for external debate. But openness of thinking and ethical values. And these areas seem to affect most the treatment of a university as the impulse that is in effect in the society. Thank you very much, Madam Rector. Could you take the floor right now?
Jeśli rzeczywiście chodzi o misję, to powiedziałabym, że nauka i dydaktyka.
Yes, as for mission and didactics, these are quite permanent elements of the mission of a given university. It has not changed over the years, but the third mission recently has undergone a significant transformation. The concept of that third mission is connected to engagement and responsibility of the university, engagement in the social and political life. Recently, many people who are present here in this room probably remember that many universities had addressed their scientific and didactic offer to a narrow group of people, the elite, you could call them. Didactics and science themselves were using the language that was difficult to understand for regular people. So it seems that today we witness the need for more openness for universities and more involvement, not on the macro scale, because that scale is not really understandable for regular people. We talk about promotion of education, of science, i.e. knowledge for the economy or knowledge for the economics. But I believe today universities require better contact with the society. Naturally, we should be at the forefront of civilization projects, but on the other hand, we should be close to people and see what's going on. We have a significant demand for such debates as we've had today. There's demand for webinars, seminars, open debates. More and more research results results are presented in social media. This is expected by young people. So this is a great challenge for universities. Maybe it's a shortcut of thinking, but I believe this tendency is going to be stronger and stronger, and universities have no choice. Even today we can see what happened to the entire economic community after the pandemic and during the crisis. The preferences by employees and students have changed, definitely. And so our obligation is to cooperate with business, but also cooperation with the regular citizens of Katowice. For example, we have the Silesian Science Festival. It's a great example. And the citizens of Katowice have come to speak to the scientists, to touch the scientists, to realize that they are not artificial, that they are people who can be, who they can talk with using normal, regular language. All right, thank you very much. The next question is going to be asked through the system of quality assurance. It's a question to Rector Tomasz Szczepański. Does the medical university know that each university should be responsible for the social competencies of their graduates? Maybe you want to add something more? Yes, it's a beautiful language, and it's quite deep, but there's something I was angry about when I was kept being asked whether we educate physicians from the point of view of the Polish Dr. Judym, and I believe we all remember that, and this is the ideal that is not fit for today's time, for today's times.
Tutaj się ograniczę do naszej działki, do medycyny. Chcemy, żebyśmy wypuszczali na rynek.
But I do want to have employees that are best qualified. And as I've said today in the morning, I'm not only referring to professional qualifications, but also the nurse, the midwife, the physician, the diagnostician should be a person who is sensitive to other people. It should be a person with empathy, because our times sometimes are too quantitative, concerning what you can earn, concerning how you have to follow the restrictions of time, while sometimes the patient takes too much of your time, and these are very elementary issues. And how to persuade our graduates that despite the great demand in the European market, how to persuade them to stay in Poland? Well, it's very difficult. Sometimes we are prone to the rules of economics, and we do not want to make students sign agreements to make them stay here. I believe that today's generation of young people are very critical of the older generations, but I want young people to realize that the state has invested in them somehow, so that they have the feeling that they should give back to society. It's very difficult to teach. In Poland you don't pay to study. But how to make people engaged with this lack of physicians that we have right now? There is also the issue of social activities. Remember previous decades where we had such events as so-called White Sundays, some activities where students would
wchodzili w te kompetencje,
would
pomagając lekarzom,
learn
działając
to
zwłaszcza
assist
dla
physicians,
małych społeczności.
especially
Teraz
in
oczywiście
small
takiego
communities.
dużego zapotrzebowania na to nie ma, ale takie właśnie
Right now,
nasze
there is
myślenia,
no significant
obchodziliśmy
demand for
50.
that,
rocznicę
but
akcji Zapomnij,
well,
gdzie właśnie
we've seen the 50th anniversary of another activity of ours, where in the Kraków and Częstochowa area, young students of medicine did a lot of work to improve the quality of health of the population that were that were forgotten in the 1960s and 70s. So there is a lot of space for learning that we will not get money for anything that you do, and what you do selflessly sometimes you will find it effective too. Thank you very much. I'd like to discuss now the issue of recommendations from the EU Council concerning lifelong education. I'd like to list these competencies now, and I'd like to ask whether in our curricula there is space for giving such a possibility to each and every one of our students, and these are as follows: the ability to critically read and write, knowing many languages, engineering and scientific competencies, digital and technical competencies, interpersonal abilities, and ability to gain new competences, an active civic approach, entrepreneurship, awareness, and cultural expression. So let's discuss these. Who would like to speak first? Maybe let's start from the persons who have not spoken today yet. Maybe some simple statements. This is the issue that was not mentioned before.
Panie rektorze, o, pan dyrektor, bardzo proszę.
Jest włączony, tak. Wydaje mi się, że wśród studentów obecnie
It seems to me among students the most important problem is lack of the ability for critical thinking. It's something that results from too much information, and what we have with social media and lack of the ability to differentiate between what's true and what's false. And this ability is going to be useful regardless of what our students are going to do in the job market, whether they work in accordance with their education or whether they take up different positions in different industries. The ethical issues should also be addressed. I don't want to mention ideology, but we should demonstrate some forms of business ethics, also in terms of cooperation with business and society, so that students acquire the knowledge on how to develop ethically and how to work in the NGO sector or the so-called second sector, because these elements in the respective levels of education have been reduced because we've resigned from the general humanistic approach to education in favor of a practical approach, and that's well understandable because we have to adapt to the contemporary requirements and to the pace of living. But on the other hand, this reflection is so important that we should not forget about it, and it's a great challenge to find the golden means. That's a wrong question for me. I would prefer to answer the first question, but if you let me, I will answer both, because these seem to be similar issues. Well, we're talking about developing different attitudes among students. From my point of view, the response is an Erasmus program, but not to brag too much about what I am doing. I think what's important is international mobility, organized not only within Erasmus+, but also in others, because in all kinds of reports that we publish, they are available on our website in PDF. We have FSR and biblioteka.pl. All these reports, whether it's a short-term or long-term mobility, whether it's trips of students, of teachers, there are many exchange programs for different groups, and all these reports demonstrate that all these persons report us that their social competencies have developed, they have become more bold, more open to contacts, they have become more tolerating and able to look at different issues from different points of view, because that's what they learn in an international group. So, my response is international mobility. It accelerates development of these competencies. And to be honest in this discussion, many scientists would say, how come after just 2 months or 2 weeks their competencies developed so fast? Well, the research that we prepare are based on declarations of the persons that we send out. But also, very often, these competencies are present in fact, and they sometimes don't realize this. So, sometimes it's important to realize you have the potential, and that this is very important. In project work, group work, international work, development of these competences is quicker. That's the non-formal education rather than within a formal education system. And you, Madam Rector, you've read about these key competencies. Well, I don't want to speak too long. Well, you could classify them into 2 groups. Some are social, soft competencies, and some are hard competencies. But again, if mobility accelerates and development of social competencies, what I like to say is that international mobility is very significant. Critical thinking, yes, if you work in an international interdisciplinary group, you then learn critical thinking, because you see that different people from different cultures or from different countries look at these issues in a different way. We can see it in Wordskis. Let me give you an example. BIM, i.e. digital architecture. There was a competition, a sports competition. Some students went there from a very good university. I asked them why were the people from other countries better than them in this competition, and they said, well, they work on the same software, they work on the same systems, they learn the same, study the same, but their colleagues from other countries had a different approach to some issues and some aspects of issues. So if you compare yourself with an international group, that opens your eyes. The hard, let's say, technical competences are also important, but if you look at components of technical competences, you will see that hard of them are social competences, in fact. Because these include communications not only with people, but communications with machines. Person-machine interface. So, to sum up, I know I am simplifying now, but in short, international mobility is the answer.
Przepraszam, bo wylosowałem pierwsze, odzywam się w tym drugim.
I'm sorry, because I was asked the first question and I'm answering for the second one. From the plenary session, from Professor Sławek's lecture, I wrote down the person is knowing, especially in what they don't know. So whatever we list in the hard and soft competencies side, it's still an endless list. So the difference is what is difficult to quantify. So, thank you.
Czy jeszcze, panie rektorze?
Mr. Rector?
To znaczy, wydaje mi się, znów odwołam się do takiego podsumowania, przepraszam pani rektor, ale chyba tak przeszliśmy od wiedzy,
There is a summary. We went from knowledge and skills to social competencies.
Efektów uczenia się. Ja myślę, i to mówiąc te słowa, tak naprawdę mówię też je sam do siebie i z pewnością zawiozę je.
I'm saying these words to myself and I'll take them to my university. Well, sometimes we concentrate too much in all these activities such as filling in some tables and formalities that we have in education. So, knowledge and skills. While we forget the third aspect. And thank you very much for this speech about Erasmus. Let's remember we also have the MOST program to exchange competencies in Poland. And sometimes the basis for finding your place in the labor market, in the society, does not have to be based on knowledge or skills. It can be the component of social competencies that a student gets. The issue is whether we provide our students with proper opportunities, whether someone who starts a new chapter in their life is able to believe that these are important too. Maybe that's most important. Because all these other changes, if we teach them critical thinking, if we teach them to differentiate between truth and opinion, and while being able to function in a society, it will then mean we are successful, so they will be sensible citizens who will do all to be a good person and for their work to have a good effect on others.
W Katowicach jest to możliwe.
It's possible in Katowice. To say something? No. To be educated in this direction. Yes. I'd like to share some doubts. It results from combination of these two points of view, while at the same time the evaluation that is at the end right now, because the question about social involvement in education and the criteria and values of long life education, on the one hand they mention the same university, but not really. Also, we keep repeating that there is no good education without good research, but at the same time every one of us knows that long life education, especially long life education, is different from what we're talking about. And I don't, for example, you, Professor, I don't think your research is present directly in didactics, right? In the day-to-day didactic at the medical faculty. So this is a response to Kasia's question about the competences developed over your entire life, or the entire life of the student who would like to be better educated. I think I, as well as every actor, is thinking about how the university should remember about research, which is absolutized and valorized by evaluation, which is very important for university, because evaluation has become too important recently, out of necessity, because statutory law has placed that priority. On the other hand, evaluation determines whether you will survive or not. So you can say that education is fundamentally important, because it is, but in practice, in the energy spent at university on management and care, science has been dominating over the last 2 or 3 years. Now the question is whether this Congress will anticipate change. Well, I'd like to, but it doesn't make sense. This kind of confrontational question, well, even if we're right, it doesn't make sense. And to conclude, I've repeated this conclusion on many occasions. I'm looking at Marcin Panys right now. He said, I think he once said something similar. But I'm going to say it more bluntly. I believe this future of Polish universities, of their vast majority, apart from maybe universities of Warsaw or Krakow or Poznań, will be determined in the third evaluation criterion. And I'm not thinking about the next evaluation, I'm talking about serious evaluation. I'm not saying evaluation is not serious, but well, this evaluation will determine our identity, our social impact, about our effect on students. So if we develop ways of making how science is positive on the life of students and on the society, we will then justify our role. But we need very good science for that, very good education. I know I'm in the second 10 research universities, and so I have to compensate this failure, and I'm saying, no, publications are not so important, grants are not so important, social impact is important. No, I'm saying social impact is only possible if you have high quality of research. Why? Because it gives me the legitimacy to enter the social life, the economics life, and the physical education, ecology, so that I have the right to say how it should be. And at the end, an anecdote that demonstrates my fantasy concerning the future of the University of Silesia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, at our campus there is a car repair shop. You can visit it tomorrow, please feel invited. Just a regular car repair shop and diagnostics shop, while 100 meters away, that's our chemistry building. And in my fantasy, the boss of this car shop comes to my friend, Michał Kaszczykowski. He's the deputy rector for education, but he comes not to the university, just asking him on the sidewalk and asks him, tell me how I can better utilize the oil spent in cars. Do you have any research into that? Could you help me in any way? So it's putting developing conditions for asking and answering such questions. That's how I understand social involvement. That's how I understand the moment, the condition where university has actual impact on the environment, i.e. where the society, being the owners of university as taxpayers, where the society has the feeling that they can make use of the university at any time, that they can ask each and every one of us in a free, non-pretentious situation and ask us how to make our lives easier. Thank you very much. So we've already started discussing
stwierdzam,
The-
umiędzynarodowienie wzmacnia
the issue that internationalization
związany z zaangażowaniem społecznym
reinforces and the social involvement of university and of our students. So today I'd like to talk about internationalization. Not internationalization as an objective of its own, but one that makes us educate differently, educate better, and affecting our perception of education in general. This discussion clearly shows that it's such a broad array of possibilities that all the initiatives listed today provide such a broad array of ideas. And I believe that this is the area that we can discuss not only from European perspective, but also from the perspective of universities, with projects financed from Erasmus, Norwegian funds, or any other source, or from their own funds, and thus seeing that education is becoming different, better. Let's start this part from statement by President Matlosz. Madzia, if we can see this statement.
Dear colleagues and friends, as President of Euroscience, the European Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology, I am very happy to be able to speak to you today at the International Congress on Education Quality in Katowice, and in particular at the opening of the panel, Quality of Education and Socioeconomic Influence on the Academic Environment within the European Education Area. Education is one of the two main missions, along with research, of universities and other higher education institutions. Production of scientific knowledge and development of critical, creative, and innovative thinking are at the heart of all research and innovation and essential for the preservation of democracy and a thriving society. With the Bologna process, the European higher education area, and programs such as Erasmus Plus and the European University Alliances, higher education, like research, is no longer a local, regional, or national matter alone, but rather a truly European endeavor. Euroscience strongly supports excellence both in European research and in higher education in Europe, since both research and higher education work together to contribute jointly to a successful knowledge-based society. We appreciate the initiative of the Academic Consortium Katowice to establish events such as the International Congress on Education Quality in order to provide opportunities for debate, exchange, and mutual learning, and to extend the outreach of the European City of Science to higher education. I wish you all a fruitful and productive panel discussion and a very successful Congress.
Dziękujemy. Jeśli mogę prosić pana
Thank you very much.
rektora
If
Grzegorza
I
Hajnderka
could ask Rector Hajnderek to address
co dają takie projekty
what
dydaktyczne
such didactic
studentom,
projects
absolwentom,
provide
pracownikom akademii. I patrzmy na
to
to
students,
ogólnie.
to employees
Po
of
prostu
universities,
wszystkich
and
tych,
let's take a
którzy
general
mogą korzystać z
approach,
dobrodziejstw takich projektów, a działają lokalnie.
No właściwie musiałbym się jeszcze do paru pytań wcześniej cofnąć.
Well, actually, I would have to.
Zacząć od takiego konkretu.
I'd have to address some other the previous issues.
Tak
While thinking about today's debate, I looked at my bookcase and I saw the book Engaged University. It was published by Krytyka Polityczna several years ago, and at the end of this volume there was an interview with a role model for me in terms of education, Professor Kowalski from the Academy of Warsaw, and he was wondering whether to educate artists or not. So the area of arts is a good example of demonstrating how combined all these things are, such as science, social competencies. That's all connected.
czyli to uczenie sztuki,
So the teaching of art, these are usually competencies that have to be supplemented on your own. But the attitude, being an artist, that's something which we're responsible for. And referring to rector of the University of Silesia,
ta sytuacja takiego zaangażowania
it seems that that local involvement of our universities is very important, i.e. thinking about the environment in which we live and the attempt to deal with this reality and developing some models of solutions that we then share on the international arena. That's one thing. But on the other hand, we have an opposite direction where we look at each other's work and we want to apply it in our universities. We have a project which started in 2015, to the best of my knowledge, and that's cooperation with a leading European university. That's the University of Arts in London. This was the cooperation between Lesław and Paweł Mędrek, who is present here today. And it's an interesting phenomenon. This project was called Parallax, which title reflects well the character and the sense of internationalization, of looking at oneself in a dynamic with a changing context. We've maintained this context because this context has been changing dynamically. On the way, we saw Brexit and the pandemic, another crisis. And looking at it apparently from the same point of view, from the same location in different contexts, that's very educational. There was another school in Göteborg. I think it's an example of how in our academy we're not interested in point-based projects. We should have a structure that can be researched in the long term. As I said, our school is based on two pillars. There is also one more project, the Agrafa project. It started from a regular competition of design graphics in 1993, to the best of my knowledge. But in 2007, my colleagues realized that we should attach to it a reflection of what designing is and can be. They've started a conference. Today, I think it's one of the most significant platforms for exchange of thoughts in Europe. We have seen prominent participants from all over Europe. And we were thinking about the neutral categories of research in designing, but it seems they are not so neutral. What is attitude in designing? What is responsible designing? All the issues addressed here today, all this is very important. So for an academy, it's easier and harder at the same time. We talk about values from the very beginning. For us, values are very important to place the university in practical terms. It's a cliche, but we forgot about art as a way of making the world more beautiful. We rather think about it as entering some important issues to public debate, to explain some things. As I said during the opening ceremony, to explain also the difficult issues which cannot be addressed by other industries, other disciplines.
równą, nie wiem, energią.
because it would be difficult
taką
for them
przewodniczącą.
to address
Nie wiem,
this
co
joint
powiedział,
area.
to ten-
Well, I don't know whether I answered your question.
Pięknie dziękuję. Trudno sobie
Well,
wyobrazić
thank you very
znowu
much.
dyskusję o umiędzynarodowieniu.
Well, it would be difficult to imagine a discussion about internationalization of universities without the voice from the National Agency for Academic Exchange. Mr. Rector, can I please address the previous part?
Chciałem zgodzić się,
Because
tylko częściowo.
I'd like to partly agree with Rector Koziołek,
Zgadzam się co do tego, że
because
zostaną nam
I
trzy
agree
uczelnie.
that
Uniwersytet Jagielloński,
in the long run we're going to have
Uniwersytet
3 universities in Krakow, in Warsaw, and maybe Poznan.
że tak może być, że tak może być. Może być taka przyszłość. Może być.
It's possible, it's possible.
Co do tego rozumiem, że zgadzamy się, że może być tak, że taka przyszłość może być. Nie, że zostanie nam
Only 3 universities on the planet? No, no,
naszej akademii.
in the academia of Poland.
Teraz jakby kwestia związana z badaniami, z prowadzeniem bardzo
The
dobrych
issue of
badań, jak
research and very good research,
jest na tyle
research of very good quality, that's so fundamental that it's not only
do społecznej
legitimacy for social responsibility of the university,
Czyli tworzymy legalne
but also
podstawy,
legitimization, so we provide legal grounds that the given university can address that issue because they have the know-how. I wouldn't say it's
z tego tytułu, że ona została
it's
powołana
legitimacy
w sposób, czy
because it was established through a specific procedure. No, it has specific research that it has conducted in a reliable and transparent manner. That's why it has the right to take a certain position.
Także ja bym tu poszedł o krok dalej.
So I would take this one step further. And I'd like to address one more thing concerning what Professor Olszak said. I like the attitude of extramuros, of the university leaving its comfort zone, leaving the relationship of master-apprentice, and what we said today at the inauguration. Because that's important, naturally, but if you want to talk about a socially involved, a socially responsible university, that's workshops, that's podcasts, showing science, that science can be used on a daily basis. That's why the festivals of science are a perfect way of social involvement for a university, but also for a regular citizen of Katowice, and they show how significant science is, which we sometimes do not appreciate enough. It is entered in the in our policies, but there is not enough. Still not enough. I know a question was asked, and we do not have unlimited time resources. So internationalization may not be a value of its own, because it will not work. But what I would like to add to this meeting is I'd like to quote some data from a short report on internationalization of higher education, prepared by Academic Cooperation and Association, financed from the Erasmus Plus program. And there were some interesting statistics. So research was conducted in 200 universities from 5 continents and describing their social responsibility in 58% of initiatives. It was the academic staff from the original country, and only in 13% of cases was there the lecturers from abroad involved. So it's hard to say that the people who participate directly in the process of internationalization can be additionally socially involved. Because it turns out that even though the academic staff is involved in the projects themselves, but the internationalization process can have the advantage that on the local scale it can be translated into specific examples, making use of the knowledge of or skills of foreign persons. We lack the effect of synergy too, because we know what NAVA is doing. We have international partnerships, etc., or the Catamaran program before, all the double Polish global studies.
Biura Uznawalności realizowane przez Biuro Uznawalności Wykształcenia. Ja tylko wskażę też na to, że te projekty w zakresie umiędzynarodowym.
Let's remember that the internationalization projects
nie tylko mobilności jako
have the form of mobility and exchange, but also the development of the image of Poland on the international scale. For example, the Warsaw University of Technology has had a project where they visited different restaurants, and so that we can discover Poland in an unconventional way, and by the way, to have an attitude to a socially responsible university that builds bridges. And I have always remembered the UMCS rector who danced an African dance, thus showing that we have great openness to those students and showing our attitude in a modern and modernist way. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think you could say even more about internationalization and about how it affects the quality of education, or conversely, whether we were able to use internationalization to improve our activity in this regard. Well, we should point out that there should be no feeling that internationalization and activity of Polish universities serves to absorb some models without thinking. No. Sometimes I participate in scientific conferences in the US that deal with academic research, and I was surprised several years ago because in the US they have guests from all over the world, and I was surprised that in fact it's the issue of didactics, but it's the issue of the entire world. Our universities and researchers have the same problem, and from my point of view, internationalization involves not assimilation or thoughtless adaptation of models, but rather exchange of experiences, a global discourse, a joint calibration of the system, and arriving at some interesting solutions. So it's not true that whatever works in Finland will always work in Poland, for example. So, generally speaking, what provides the added value it's a cause of chaos, and within that chaos
To samo dotyczy na przykład, tutaj ja też widzę duży związek, bo przecież też do tego służy program Erasmus.
And well, the Erasmus Plus program has been used for that, i.e. for debate and reflection and conversation among universities concerning some organization of the work of universities. And very often you can see the feedback, i.e. the fact that we are having a conversation on reorganization of the operation of university. It provides some impact for reflections and arriving at interesting solutions in the scope of didactics and education. Let me use an analogy here.
Trochę, żeby tutaj ożywić może, bo już późno. Była taka dyskusja, czy lepszy jest model w szkołach
There was a discussion, do we need a two-level model with a junior secondary school or a three-level model or a two-level model? Well, if you look at the numbers and the results, they are both, there is no advantage to any of them. Well, the fact that we had junior secondary schools and something positive has been introduced in Poland, that was because there was some organizational mess, and this forced teachers to reflect, well, how do I teach? How do I find myself in this system? So a structural change translated significantly at this stage. And now everyone is starting to think how to teach. And the same happened in the other way. So when you go from the three-level system to the two-level system, that's the same phenomenon. So some kind of constructive mess has provided some good feedback for teaching. And in this international discussion, we are talking about different solutions, and this forces us to reflect and to introduce different interesting solutions to didactics, to education. So for me, well, I know it's a simplification, but for me, internationalization is very important. I think it is even a value of its own. We have to not agree on something. Maybe we will find some common ground. Ladies and gentlemen, I think Mr. President will talk more about internationalization, but soon we will go to the conclusion of this panel, i.e. the subject that's very important, also from the point of view of how we teach. Well, I'm glad to talk about internationalization. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember when we started with CRASP to organize and support internationalization when we entered the European Union. I remember we met Rector Ziejka from the Jagiellonian University. We had a talk in Krakow. It's a city well organized for such friendly meetings, and we reached the conclusion that being in the European Union, it was 2004, we cannot continue to be a state where you have 0.7 of foreign students, because that meant that we had almost no foreign students. We had some staff going to work in the US, physicians going to France, to the US, etc. But this was either one professor who would do that. So it was nice, very nice during martial law, because it helped people survive, but it was basically absent on a large scale. And we believed that there is no point why we do it. It was easy because in the statistics of EU countries we were almost in the last place. And why is that? Well, in all the areas of operation of a university, we've had an audit recently of 20 EDUB universities. It was an idea by the by the penultimate minister, Minister Govin, to help universities somehow to look at them from the point of view of issues that are important from the point of view of global rankings. We mapped these areas and it turned out that among these important areas, internationalization is separate, but also it's at the very center. At university, there is no process without internationalization. Maybe it's a simplified way of thinking, but the processes are different. There are 12 factors of internationalization. But in the future, you cannot ignore internationalization. It's a permanent element of Polish higher education. The scholarship agencies, because this is a distribution of an amount to Polish universities, especially from the Erasmus Plus program, and distribution of some funds and some way of thinking by the EU, going through all the segments, not only higher education. It is only an element, but to address the issue of internationalization, what universities have been doing over more than a dozen years. Well, Professor Banish was involved in this. When he had to, he would go to France. These are activities by different persons, and the internationalization index was very poor, and now it's quite good. Naturally, we have different anomalies. For example, in Łódź, there is one university with 3,000 foreign students. There are 5 teachers, 3,000 foreign students, and in the statistics downloaded every year, they are always on the first year students. So we can draw the conclusion how it is possible that you have 3,000 students only on the first year. So there are anomalies, but the effort that we did, it was by universities. You can support them. Because how to make a group to cooperate with one another? Would the Krakow University allow the University of Warsaw to deal with their foreign interests? No, but if it's a small university, it can be done. So, in my opinion, this problem is resolved, whatever it means. But generally speaking, over the more than a dozen years, we have not resolved this issue. We've even locked out NAWA. Mr. President, please keep this microphone, because there is another issue that we would like to address is rankings, not only in general terms, but the question of whether these domestic and international rankings can reflect that a university is socially responsible, and whether the university prepares its students to be socially responsible. It's dangerous to ask me about rankings, because I'll never give away my microphone. Well, rankings can provide a lot of information, but at the same time you have to look out when using them. Because what's a ranking? A ranking is a model of an ideal. So we figure out the model of perfect university, right? It should be prestigious, have research achievements, be internationally recognizable. The graduates should have a diploma that counts in the labor market. we should have proper conditions for studying. And this is the model, the ideal that the organizers of the ranking try to compare to every university, taking into account some criteria. And some technicalities have to be addressed, because these important indicators, indices, have to be compared with reality. And these technicalities have to be translated into numbers. Because all rankings, that's multidimensional analysis, right? Just like econometrics, etc. That's science analysis. But that's qualitative, not quantitative. In fact, qualitative and quantitative analysis. We need numbers to quantify unquantifiable things. Because quality can be a thing that we're going to dispute about until the end of humanity. And the indicators that we need must be translated into numbers, otherwise we cannot quantify that. And the indices can be split into two groups, ones that provide quality and ones that reflect quality. For example, at university, the number of professors or great equipment, electronic microscopes, they create quality because they provide a chance to have the didactic process at a higher level. But there is also a second group of indices that reflect. For example, a Nobel Prize for a graduate of a given university reflects its level. While it's a problem concerning what is in between the process itself. If we want to have a socially responsible university with socially responsible attitudes or civic attitudes, well, usually the rankings do not take this into account. Because naturally we have two types of rankings also, domestic ones and international ones. And international rankings do not take this into account, even though they pretend to, because quality of education, there is the so-called by proxy attitude. So there are two measures taken into account. One, it's the student-staff ratio. Well, generally speaking, it does not make sense to compare universities from different countries because you have different traditions, and it results in manipulations. Because if an international ranking organization asks the universities to state how many professors they have, defined according to different criteria, then the best universities are ones from Kazakhstan, because they don't have the Poland system there. If you have the ratio of 20%, well, it does not make sense. It's a proxy ratio or opinion ratio, where attempt is made to reflect. I have an anonymous survey right now. I'm asked, how do I assess a number of universities? And like every survey, it's a sociological, justified tool, but when I'm asked to compare a university from Chile with a university from Azerbaijan, then, well, the credibility of that ranking is zero. And in different ranking ratios, that's 40 or 50%. This shows that the organizers of rankings are helpless. Because it's not that they want to hide something, no, they want to measure something, but they use these weird measures. In domestic rankings, it's easier because all universities operate in one cultural environment and one legal environment. So there are more ratios then. But in the perspective ranking, we do not use the term quality of education because we are not so bold. We say conditions of studying. And we take into account the proportion, access to scientific staff, habilitated doctors and professors, and comparison of some conditions of education. So access, what's access? What's the access? So what access does a student have to meet a professor? Do we take into account accreditations evaluated by others? We assign them, or in the third index, we do research, but that's only 10% significance of reputation, where we ask professors. It's always a different group of professors. Which university would they recommend to their children, to their friends? But, ladies and gentlemen, we are also aware of limitations of our ratios and indices. But, ladies and gentlemen, if I were to develop a ratio to measure social responsibility, my thinking would be as follows, based on discussion here today. We need some criteria. We have the competencies specified by the European Union. As a side note, once we've prepared an educational policy for one of the presidential candidates, it turned out, we took an American approach to that, it turned out that the number of competencies has to be as small as possible so that we can operationalize it. Because if you put everything there in the EU, it's then without purpose. No university can do everything. You can write down anything. All descriptions of competencies are no use from my point of view of rankings. I remember people filling in these documents. It was dramatic. But the 4 competencies that we introduced, it was very simple in my place. These have to be competencies of IT, in short. IT competencies. Today you cannot function without knowledge of basic IT tools. Because, for example, in Ukraine they have the DIA system. That's 5 times better than M-Obywatel system. Because there the state has survived with IT. The second competency is 2+1. We've not called it like you have, but we said they have to know 2 languages and learn and keep learning the third one. It was taken from different focuses and questionnaires, because the EU mentions all kinds of competencies. So you have to teach people how to work in a team. Ask any director in any company, in any team. We have stand-uppers. What do you call them? Stand-up comedians. Well, influencers, right. Yes, we can say stand-up comedians or celebrities. I'm saying stand-up comedians because it's my dream to speak and to do stand-up. Ladies and gentlemen, we say we lack competencies of teamwork and the willingness to be to be directors. It's dramatic. Naturally, everyone wants to be the boss of Orlen, but at the middle level, no people want to do that. It's especially more dramatic because after the pandemic, we want to live at home, away from others, without contact. And the third competency is to teach people to be able to learn. And if you want to split it into more objectives, that wouldn't make any sense. Well, the process between these indices that provide quality and provide access to different things and effects, what's in between, it's difficult to assess. Well, my last statement, if we wanted today, we could agree what Polish universities do to help Ukraine. That's certainly a sign of social responsibility. What we do is unique. Everyone does it the best way they can. And so, should we quantify that? Should we say that this university sent 5 trucks with humanitarian aid and it's better than the one that sent 4 or 3 trucks? No, some of these convoys were joined by trucks with spare parts for tanks. Or the fact that in our dorm we provided assistance to Ukrainian families. No, we cannot evaluate it in terms of numbers. Well, rankings have limitations, and the area of shaping and educating, this should be away from simple quantifications and comparisons, because it wouldn't be fair. Waldek, no. We know each other pretty well, that's why I'm saying Waldek. Let's simplify this. In fact, the point is to have one competency, because we've made a mess in this discussion, i.e. communication. Not only communication in a foreign language, but also communication in an interdisciplinary group, in an international group. The ability to cooperate, to communicate with technology, with machines, with AI. And in fact, this boils down to one competency, to communication. And if we look at this at things from different points of view, it will be easier to operationalize, and we can help these rankings. Ladies and gentlemen, although my tablet has shut off because we've run out of time, if my speakers would like to say something, this is the time. Would you like to add anything? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have Deputy Rector Raymond, and I have to say something about our university. In the convention of certain competencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad that we've won the last 5 rankings, and so I have no complexes regarding evaluation. We have the A+ rank grade. But what I'd like to add, and this concerns sports, I believe that when talking about competencies, it's not only the issue of communication, because someone can use communication to go all-inclusive, or someone can go use hitchhike to holidays, and someone can use Erasmus to learn or not. If someone goes to a sports university, they are promised that it will be blood, sweat and tears. And if such competencies are taught, this is not included in rankings. If we teach this to our students, we will then bring them up to a certain degree too. Grzegorz uses our ping-pong tables, and every time I think about it, I'm happy.
Nie chciałbym znowu kończyć w ten sposób wypowiedź, że to jest szczególnie ważne w tych czasach, ale to jest szczególnie.
This is particularly important in our times. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Pozwólcie Państwo,
Thank you. Let me, ladies and gentlemen, finish. No, go ahead, Mr. President. When I mentioned the assistance to Ukrainians, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm using this invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, something that is not going to be included in rankings, but if you would like to do something good for Ukrainians, in a moment, Krzysztof here will leave a leaflet, because we want to do a lot. And a Polish Ukrainian undertaking not taken into account in rankings, but worth your interest certainly. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for adding this private statement. Thank you very much. All of you, it was a great honor for me and for all the organizers of our Congress to be able to listen to you today and to your debate, to your opinions on whether it's worth being a socially responsible university. And I'd like to end with the thought that probably all our discussions are open-ended, i.e. it's worth to meet, to discuss these issues, and I'd like to thank you all for becoming involved in all our Congress events. Today we will have the part related to internationalization. Thank you very much.